Hello everybody and welcome back to Kaju Samyuzong Edinburgh and to the fifth session in this Living the Legacy of Akong Rinpoche. So not just reading and studying it but living it hopefully. So and this one is going to be on training the mind. But we'll see, the reason why we're looking at Rinpoche's take is because he has a very modern, practical take on this, and in life in general. So I think it's very, very helpful. Okay, so as usual, we'll begin our session in a good way by, we will first of all say the lineage prayer. Doje chan chen te lo na ro tang ma pa mi la che je gam po pa du sum she cha kun chen kar ma pa je shi jung je jut pa sin nam tang Di tak sa sampadan druk pasuk sablam chaja chela nganyepe nyame dragan dakpo kajuala sawan bepso kaju lama Jud pasin no nam ta chin jilo shen lo gom jia kampa sung pa shin sen or kun la chak shen me patang sen de tak che pe gom chen la Nye kor shenpa me pa chen jilo mugu gom jigo sung pa shin menga tergo jepe lamala chundu sawa pe gom chen la Chamin magu chewa chen jilo yang mei gom jiang share sung pa shin kang sha tok pe ngo so mate ma cha te ka jo pe gom chen la gom cha lo tang Chawa chin jilo nam to ngo chakor sung pa shin chiang mayen chiriang charwala mangaro pa charwe gom chen la kode arme topa chin jilo Chewa kuntuyada lama tang Chame chuchi pala long chuching Satang lam chi anten rabsoni Doje changi kompang yor talk show Okay, I think it's good to say it in Tibetan from time to time and refresh the link. So, training the mind. In the book that was transcribed from Rinpoche's teachings on this subject, his first sentence is a kind of subheading, and it's kind of encapsulating what this means. What do we mean by training the mind? And he says, by training the mind, you see your own face more clearly. That's the point of it. Of course, he's using a physical metaphor of the face, but what he means is you're seeing your mind, you're using your mind, you're training your mind to see your mind. The mind is what enables you to see your mind. It's all we have, isn't it? We only have the mind. That's all there is, in fact, is the mind. So the mind is looking at itself. But of course, that can be a bit difficult for us to sort of grasp, because there's nothing to grasp. There's no physical thing to grasp. It's a way of understanding that is not a sort of physically graspable thing. So he's using that as a metaphor, because we all understand when you look into a mirror, you're using your eyes and you're looking at yourself to see yourself, isn't it? Of course, it's only an image, but it's a metaphor for that. So you're looking in the mirror to see what's going on with yourself, in a physical sense. Maybe not only physical, but definitely physical. You might also be able to see something of your state of mind by the expression you've got, but essentially it's a physical thing. So, but in this case, we're talking about by training the mind to see your own, who you are more clearly, what's going on. Not the stories that we tell ourselves about what's going on, but what's actually happening. This is what we need to explore. That's what training the mind is about. We have to look very honestly at ourselves. And we don't do that. In the normal course of the day, we don't do that very much. We just get on to the next thing, especially now life's so busy, and we're always encouraged to do more and more and more, and there's no time, there's no space to actually see what is going on here. So by training the mind to see your mind, it means to getting to know yourself, warts and all. Of course, warts is also a physical metaphor, but meaning problems or misunderstandings, or what you need to work on, or confusion. That's what I mean by warts and all. Means not just the nice sort of things that you like about yourself, but looking at yourself really honestly, because it's not that you don't have good qualities, of course you do. In fact, you have all the qualities you need to become a Buddha. But why aren't you a Buddha? Why aren't we Buddhas? Is because of the warts and all. so that's why we need to put the emphasis to clear the obstacles. They are obstacles, aren't they? They're obstacles to our becoming our full potential. So it's not that we sort of have this terrible obsession about only seeing the problems, but you need to look at the problems in order for to be no more problems. So if you've got obstacles somewhere in the way, then that's what your first thing is, to clear that away, isn't it? And then you have the way ahead is clear. So whatever obstacles there are have arisen from our own kind of state of confusion, our ignorance, you could say, or not understanding, or not getting it. What are we not getting here? And because I think it's always been the case that we distract ourselves with whatever, with pleasures and this and that, or just busyness, or staying alive, and all of these things. But I do really feel that it's got so much more, even in my lifetime, and I've not been alive, I've been alive quite a long time, but not that long, but I've seen an appreciable difference between when I was a child and now, or even when I was a teenager and now, or even the last 10 years. Just constant distraction. We are encouraged to be distracted. What else are phones? I mean, of course, the phones have a use, and don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, don't want to throw the phone out with, I'm not going to throw my phone out, but I have to monitor myself about what I use the phone for and how long I use it, and just keep an eye on it. because they are very addictive, and I can see that from the behavior of people, especially young people that were brought up with them. You know, that they've not sort of come halfway through their life or whatever, but they've known nothing but from the cradle to the grave. Yeah, you see, you know, go on a bus, there's a mother with a small child's in the pram, and it's on the phone. The mother's on the phone, the child is on the phone. Or sometimes the child cries and then the mother gives it a phone. Not attention. Of course, some mothers do, but I've often seen that they get the phone to play a game or distract themselves. So I think there's more need than ever to really sharpen our minds and use our minds to look at our minds and see what we have, who we truly are. So let's have a look at what Rinpoche actually says. So he says that he starts off by saying these days mind training is seen as something new. It's, you know, you hear this phrase, mind training. Ooh, what's that, you know? But in Buddhism, we've always talked about mind training. Surely, since the day you were born, you've been training your mind. Your mind has been trained by your mother teaching you how to drink milk. I mean, you have to use your mind. You've got nothing else you can use, you know, how to drink milk on that first day. So your mind training education began. So I don't think it's only Buddhists who talk about mind training. You know, everything is mind training because you learn through your mind. Whatever it is you learn, it's some form of mind training. When we teach someone about how to clean something or how to talk, how to use language, acting, conversation, all these daily things, they are all part of training and all have to do with your mind. If you didn't have a mind, how could you train? How could you be trained? So everything depends on your mind. So how could you use speech, for example? I think we have to understand that we've all done mind training to various degrees, but there are different types of mind training. So it's not that it's something completely foreign to you, but now if we talk about the way that Buddhism is talking about mind training, so in Buddhist mind training, it has more to do with the benefit of training. So Buddhism, he says, puts together all the positive things that you already know within yourself, and then emphasizes that there is good about that, there's something bad about that, there may be some neutral things. So it's kind of confirming or reassuring what you already know on some level, but maybe you don't have very much confidence in it. Or, you know, I mean, this is one of the, what makes me think of just now is that one of the reasons I get asked is, well, why did you become a Buddhist? You know, why, you know, you weren't born a Buddhist, why did you become a Buddhist? And my answer is that because, I mean, I was reading different books of different religions and just open to things generally. I wasn't trying to be a Buddhist or anything, but Buddhism was some of what I was reading. I was reading many different things. So my answer to that question is, well, because what I know of Buddhist thought and understanding is that it chimes with what I've learnt for myself. It corroborates what I've learnt already on some level. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that, but that was what I found the most kind of, well, I agree with it. It agrees with me, I agree with it, what little I know of it. But that happened to the degree where I wanted to know more because, well, this goes above and beyond what I know. But at least I feel like I'm already on that kind of track, unknowingly, of that way of seeing. So then I just carried on. I think that started to happen when I lived in Bali, and there was many different religions in Bali and many different ways of life, but the Buddhism I kept coming back to. And when I had to go to get a visa or something like that, I would go and buy books in Singapore or Australia where I had to go, and very often they would, not entirely, but quite often they would become more and more Buddhist the longer I went on, because it was the one that was the most meaningful to me. And I got books by all different Buddhists, but of course the Dalai Lama as well. He's got many books out. And then when I came back to this country, and I heard that the Dalai Lama was giving a talk at, two places that mentioned in the article that I read. One was at the Barbican, I think it was, somewhere in London, and the other was at a place called Samuling, which I'd never heard of. But when it said where it was in Scotland, I was in Yorkshire, I thought, oh, well, that's more accessible. So really just practical reasons, and I went. And so the Dalai Lama was actually the first real Buddhist that I ever met. Well, start at the top and see how you get on. And I didn't meet anybody else in Samuling. I mean, when I say met it, he spoke to everybody, but I think everybody felt that he was speaking to them. I certainly felt that way. It was very personal, and so and very, very reassuring. So anyway, that's how it began for me. But what I'm saying is I'm agreeing, corroborating what Rinpoche says here, that we already have some training. We recognize it when we hear it. It's not that it's totally new to us, it's just that we didn't call it mind training or something, And of course in Buddhism it's become very highly evolved in many different ways of learning and in reflection and in meditation. So all of these things are used in mind training. So in Buddhism you put different values on the things you have already trained to do and the things you are practicing. So what you're already doing, you see with more clarity and understanding, So perhaps you have the habit of watching and copying other people, and it will alert you to what you're doing, whether it's good or bad or neutral sort of thing. So, for example, he says, perhaps you have the habit of watching and copying other people's actions. This is very common, isn't it? We have these sort of memes, these kind of things that we copy, or figures of speech. You hear it a lot, and it can be very annoying, those ones. So, you hear this phrase, and then it's everywhere. It's like contagious. But so are actions. And so sometimes, we end up watching and copying other people's actions without really thinking whether those actions were right or wrong. We just do them because somebody else is doing them, and then another one, and then we end up doing that thing, whatever it is. That's where they can have a problem, isn't it? Because you're not really subjecting it to any kind of thinking or discernment about whether it's positive or negative, or it's just, you catch it like you catch a cold sometimes, whether the speech is right or wrong, or whether these things that they were doing and now you're doing, whether they have positive benefit or not. If you think back to when you were a child or a teenager, or you just end up smoking because the other people smoke, and the other kids smoke, and you go behind the garage to have a cigarette, or whatever it is, or you're taking God knows what, because somebody else is doing it, and you just, I'll give that a go. That's how a lot of negative stuff can start. Of course, you can also have positive influences as well. But the point is, you need to really watch what's going on and be alert. Is it going to be beneficial, or is it not? Is it going to be harmful to you or to others or not? Not just go, whatever influence is around, to just take it on board without subjecting it to any kind of thought and examination. And when you think about, again, how modern society is going, there's so much of that distraction and manipulation. I've not even got onto like deep fake and all that kind of thing, which is misinformation, disinformation, the internet, all these things, it's so prevalent now. Very hard to keep on. You kind of have to be guarded about things, and discerning. So that's even more reason. And then he says, if you copy and don't analyze what's going on, what you're copying, then you're like a parrot. He says, your parrots can copy human voices very clearly when they're trained to do so. But the parrot doesn't see the value or meaning of the words. It just uses what is taught in order to get food, because that's how you train them, isn't it? You say, pretty Polly, or whatever, and then it'll go pretty Polly, and then you give it a treat. Or you train your dog to sit, and then you give it a treat, so it sits down. And that's what's happening to us. We get money, don't we? We get money, or we get food, or we get some reward, or we get a degree. I mean, I'm not saying there's something wrong with getting a degree, but we're taught in that way. We're not really taught to think for ourselves. We kind of accept, if I get, I'll study that, and then I'll get a degree, and then I'll get more wages, and then I'll have a good job, and then I'll have more, probably likely to get whatever. That's the way we get taught, isn't it? By reward. Like Pavlov's dog. But the point is that, you can be doing something good, and then it's fine. But we can also be doing something negative, and also get a reward, isn't it? Yeah. When a parrot is just parroting words, it doesn't see the words as right or wrong or what the meaning is. It's just saying something that, for some reason, some person has tried to make it say. So we're acting towards those parrots in the way that because the person who's teaching it to say that wants the parrot to say something, and then it will be funny, and when people come, it'll make them laugh, and they'll think, oh, isn't it such a clever parrot, or whatever. There's always some reason why they're making it do that, or to just exert control. So we are to parrots what people like Elon Musk is towards us. Sorry, Rinpoche, I'm interjecting perhaps a little bit too much there. But we didn't have such sophisticated AI and stuff like that when Rinpoche was alive. Even it's only really the last 10 years that this has become a major problem, I think. But we apply what Rinpoche is saying to that. Double awareness we need, because it's become so much more everywhere. It's just everywhere now. In our everyday life, we act very freely in any way we wish. We're lucky. We've been born in a country where we have relative freedom, and so we act in our everyday life. We act very freely, however we want. We say, I have the right to do this. I have the right to say this. Freedom of speech and all of this, and it is based on what you know or how you have been trained. And how you have been trained, well, it depends how you've been trained and who's been doing the training. And sometimes, if we've not been using any kind of discernment, then it's a 50-50 chance. Sometimes what we say may make people happy, sometimes it might make them very upset. And that's our worldly life of speech and actions. We don't really think about the repercussions of what we're doing, or even what we've taken on board ourselves. If we take on board stuff that is detrimental, how is that going to affect others when we relay that to them? That's then going to be a very detrimental sort of continuum, isn't it? If we take on board something that's more beneficial, that will have a very beneficial view. But a lot of the time, we don't even make that distinction. So, beware of influencers. Who's influencing you, you know? And then it says, of course, in your mind you have many thoughts, constant thoughts, good and bad. You make judgments, and sometimes you might judge falsely and make mistakes in what you're judging, or how you're seeing somebody or something. You may or may not have an accurate judgment in that. In Buddhism, everything you think is mostly considered to be either positive or negative. You could say right or wrong, but that has a bit more of a prescriptive sort of feel to it. But kind of, because I don't think we intend to do wrong things. We think we're doing right things, it's just that we're mistaken. So you could say positive or negative is probably more accurate and less sort of judgmental in that way. But why is something negative or positive is because of where it's going, what it's going to lead to. But often we don't think about that, do we? We just do something or we say something, and you don't actually think ahead to, well, how's that going to affect that person or that situation? Or maybe we do sometimes, but a lot of the time we don't. We just blurt stuff out. Sometimes we need to imagine what would happen if we were going to act out our thoughts. So, we might have a thought which is maybe negative or positive, but maybe we're not going to be acting out on it. We have this thought. We think something like, oh, he looks very kind. He's a nice person. Yeah. And so then the likelihood of whenever you do act out to that person, it'll be something fairly positive. On the other hand, you might be saying, well, that person looks really, I don't like the look of him at all, And so then the likelihood of the communication you have with that person is going to have some slightly negative twist to it. May not be like, going to kill him or something like that, but it's not going to be that pleasant, is it? Because you've had that negative thought for whatever reason. So, if we imagine what would happen if we were going to act out our thought, that will be one way of kind of pulling back and thinking, well, hang on, what am I doing here? Why am I just being more aware of these thoughts that occur, obviously, often for very random sort of reasons. Oh, I don't like the look of him. What do you really don't like? You've never met the person, you don't know the person, and he's never done anything to you or anything like that. But for some reason you have a slightly negative thing, which is your problem, not his, But you've made a problem. We make a problem for ourselves, so we act in a slightly different way to someone. Oh, hello. So, and we receive that, don't we? We go somewhere, someone's nice to us, and sometimes they're she's a bit offish with me, what's up with her? And then suddenly you've got a little mini war going on with someone you don't even know. It happens all the time. So if we imagine what would happen if we were going to act out our thoughts, then we see that maybe they would lead to something negative. So it's just a question of becoming aware. You've not done anything, you just thought something, and if you have that kind of awareness, you think, well, why am I saying? Why am I thinking that? I don't actually know that person. Or even if you did, how is thinking negatively about them going to help you or them? It's not really beneficial for anybody, is it? That's not to say that you should have a sort of rose-tinted glasses on and you think everybody's wonderful and, no, of course not. You have to be realistic. But you don't have to follow through, You may have reason to think something, well, I better watch it with that person. They tend to be a little bit whatever. But anyway, these are shades of meaning. So in Buddhism, we're mostly trained to think positively. When in doubt, think positively, unless you have good reason. And even if somebody is negative towards you, that's actually their problem, unless you make it your problem. You know, you could maybe have some compassion for that person because they're stuck in a negative way of behaving. They're being negative towards you. You're pretty sure you haven't done anything to cause that. Or you could also examine yourself. Maybe you did unwittingly speak a bit sharp or something like that. So there may be a reason. Anyway, if you look at yourself, and if you anyway think, well, I don't know what they're going through, they may have had a really tough time, whatever, you know, so at least you're not building up a negative opinion on somebody. You give them a bit of leeway, you know. So you're more positive, you have a more positive attitude. You don't have to paint everybody in, you know, rose-colored, candy-colored Disney creature, but you give them a bit more patience, a bit more, because this is you kind of training your mind to be more patient, to be more tolerant, to be more open, to be more understanding, rather than just put a judgment on somebody for whatever reason. So then once you're trained in this way, your actions will improve due to your positive thinking. If you're thinking in a more positive way, more beneficial way to yourself and for others, then your actions, whatever actions you do take, will be more in accord with that. So positive thinking in this case means not harming others, not upsetting others, and as possible, if possible, creating a happy or kind of like contented environment of people. So this relative happiness that you can foster, you know, can lead to ultimate happiness. Ultimate happiness is not the kind of happiness where you gain something and then which later causes suffering. That's the ultimate happiness. Some happiness you could engender, but that it's worldly happiness, and it kind of may go either way, you know, because it's not totally pure. But by training in that, in the relative happiness, it can eventually lead to ultimate happiness, which is unmistaken. Because, you know, in the relative sense, what makes us happy is often very worldly kind of things. So that's not guaranteed to last. In fact, it's guaranteed not to last. But it's a start, it's something positive. And if you encourage yourself in that way, then ultimately it will have lead to ultimate happiness. But in itself, it's not you know, it's not ultimate, it's relative, it's if this, if that. Ultimate happiness is not the kind of happiness where you gain something and which then later causes suffering. You can see the difference, yeah? So relative happiness is, you know, you might want something, and then you get that thing, and it makes you happy for a little while, and that's great. Or you give something, and that makes them happy for a little while. That's great. And then somebody steals it, or you drop it, or whatever, and it's broken, and then you, oh no. So that, I mean, that's just a silly metaphor in a way, but worldly happiness is like that because it doesn't last, basically. So even in getting what you want, there's always this sort of codicil of, well, but it's not going to last, whatever it is. But we're talking about training, and the principle is that your training should not lead to actions which are negative. When you start having negative feelings or thoughts, head them off at the pass, you know, don't allow it to proliferate into actually acting on it. And that's really going to make it a lot worse if you actually act on it. Your actions should become a continuation of all that is positive. And therefore, in Buddhism, mind training is about whatever leads to ultimate happiness. So this happiness is not like eating a piece of sugar or fudge, which makes you feel happy, but then later ends up making you sick. And we can all relate to something like that. In that case, happiness has led to unhappiness. You're happy for a few moments, but then you wind up too much sugar, maybe your teeth start rotting or whatever, and it can lead to unhappiness. So mind training is about how to improve your life, not just for 1 or 2 minutes, but for the whole of your life, from birth to death. That's what we mean by mind training. If you want to train your mind, it is important to analyze yourself. Are you doing it now as we speak? Because I am, and I know I've already today I've thought and said things a bit negative, you know, maybe with good intention, but not really thinking it through. So, and the more you do it, the more fine it gets, you know, because maybe, okay, you're not going to go out and murder somebody or whatever, but, you know, we often let our mouths run away with ourselves, don't we? Just without thinking about the effect it might have. So it may not be intentional, but this is what we've got to watch, you know. That's the training. That's why we need it. We cannot train ourselves according to another person's mind. We can only train ourselves according to our mind, as we are now. Therefore, when we talk about mind training, we are training ourselves how to have a better understanding, how to see ourselves more clearly. If we see ourselves clearly, you see others more clearly. So he says mind training is a bit like looking at yourself in a mirror. But it's not looking in a mirror, it's looking into your life, where you are, who you are right now, here and now. It's not about putting on some makeup on your face or changing something like that, you know. It's about improving your understanding. Because so often we just tootle on through life, you know, and if things are going sort of okay, we don't really examine it. We think, oh, well, this is all right, you know, what shall I do next? And if I can do this. We have a lot of freedom, don't we? We do have freedom to do just whatever we want, and it's good to enjoy our life, but we can waste a lot of time as well, you know, not really appreciate what we're here for and what we could be doing. Yeah. Of course, you need to look after yourself and give yourself what you need for your well-being. But the best thing you can do is to train your mind. And that doesn't mean to say what it is, it's talking about self-awareness. So self-awareness in any situation, it doesn't mean to say you've got to be, you know, sitting inside of the books and, oh, I've got to think, and studying in that way, like, you know, you're studying yourself, so you're always with yourself. You can do it anytime, any place, anywhere. You know? That's when it's actually very, very useful, when you use anytime, any place, anywhere, because that can be when you tend to trip up. Because you might be in the middle of some quite distracting sort of thing going on, you know, you might be anywhere and not really aware. Self-aware. It doesn't mean to say that you should be all tense about yourself and, oh no, what have I done now? And you know, you'd be relaxed, because you won't get anywhere if you're uptight. You do have to be in a relaxed and compassionate frame of mind towards yourself as well as others. So when you spot something in yourself, you go, oh no, I made a mistake, what an idiot. You know, because that's not really going to help either. The fact that you acknowledge that you've made a mistake or you've thought something unskillful, okay, that's good. You recognized it. So you don't need to feel bad about recognizing it. Actually, well, you don't need to be patting yourself on the back either. You just, oh, okay, that's good then, I recognize that. I must bear that in mind. Try not to keep doing it, just become more sensitive to it. And then you progress. That's the training, isn't it? You can't do everything all at once. You can't go from where we are to straight Buddhahood. There's stages and paths, and it's a long haul, It may take many, many lifetimes, but we have the potential. So mind training, how to improve your understanding. So it's about how you can bring yourself freedom, how you can become flexible rather than rigid. This is very important. We are brought up very rigidly, especially if we are educated people. I'm quoting Rinpoche here. Educated people are the most rigid. They've been trained so hard in a certain way that I'm praised for that, so they've got no reason to change. They've been rewarded for it as well. So if you're an educated person, and then he just gives these examples which are quite funny. If you're an educated person, he's not talking about academia in this sense. When somebody gives you fish to eat, you only want to eat it with a fish knife and fork. You don't want the other one, not the other one. If you get steak, you need a steak knife. For soup, you need a soup spoon. If you have dessert, you need a dessert spoon. If you have a cup of tea, you need a teaspoon. You have such a complicated life. I cannot understand why you need one kind of glass for whiskey, another one for brandy, another one for wine, another one for water. When you have to drink, it all goes in your mouth. Why do you have to make things so complicated and expensive? If you go to the East, for example in Tibet, people have one bowl to put their food in. They don't have 6 or 7 plates, 3 or 4 types of knives and forks or spoons. They have one of everything. It's so much more flexible. It really doesn't matter how you eat as long as your stomach is full. So much of our lives are made up of these kind of traditions. And then if you're invited somewhere very sort of a bit posh, and you're going to do the inviting these posh people, it's very respectable, so I need all these cups and knives and spoons. And you feel that if you don't have all these things, you're a failure, then you can't invite those people. Actually, I remember being up at, I'm going to tell tales on your Rinpoche. I've been up at the cottage and preparing the big table for people, and I remember having quite a few knives and forks that I had to set out. Just saying. We'll say that Rinpoche was meeting us halfway. There weren't a lot, but there were definitely more than just one of each. But we do make life so complicated, and then everything becomes a matter of being trained and educated in that. And we look down on people that haven't got that. They're eating with the wrong spoon. You should do it that way, not that way. It becomes acceptable and not acceptable, and we judge people because of that. I lived in Bali, I just used to eat with my fingers all the time, and when I came back to this country I found it really hard to go back to putting metal in my mouth. That felt really horrible, putting these metal things in my mouth. For 10 years I lived in Bali and I was eating like this, It was fine. We make life so complicated, and everything becomes a matter of training and education, and we feel if we're not taught that way, we become paralyzed. We don't know what to do. We're like, which do I use first? But not see what everyone else is doing. It becomes a way of judging people. Well, they've obviously not been taught that. Now it's almost impossible to develop if you did not go to the right school, or you didn't learn something in a classroom or a lecture theatre. You need a class for cooking, you need a class for recipes, French recipes, German recipes. 7 years training to become a cook. So he's just saying how complicated we make things. Of course, you need education, you need to learn and write and go to school, but there are so many other things that have become a matter of training. There are shows on television teaching you how to dress, how to cook, so many cooking ones. I mean, Rinpoche, I'm sorry, but now there's like 10 times more than when there were. It's like you can look across several channels at the same time and they've all got cooking programs on. And this country has an obesity problem. Where are we going with this? I'm not saying that they're teaching you to eat the wrong things necessarily, but there is a very strong focus on that, on food, as a reward or whatever. And there's a lot of obesity, it's an epidemic of obesity, and then at the other end of the scale, literally scale, you get people who are anorexic because there's this focus, too much focus on it. All kinds of training, and none of it has any real value in the end. You learn things and soon they're forgotten. Training becomes like a form of entertainment. And just one other thing, he says that the more that population increases, the more people need. They look for some subject to present as training, so they've got a job, so they've got a better income. Maybe if I present this in a training way, then we'll get money for that, I'll make a living from it. Things that you would just normally have done anyway and just showed people how to do things, but suddenly become an income stream. I mean, influencers, you're going to say, make money, don't they, from that? They make money because they promote things or commodities or whatever and they push that, and then people will buy more of those things. So it's just so ridiculous, crazy. But even he gives actually quite an old tradition. He says, people make things up, such as the Japanese tea ceremony, to teach people how to drink a cup of tea. They're making it a form of education, isn't it? You have to know how to do that. And if you don't, then you don't even know how to do that. Once everything becomes a matter of education, if you want to do something on your own, you may think, I don't know, I should do this. I've not been to the right classes. I've not had any training. Very simple things like sewing, cooking, knitting. All of these things are examples of this attitude. We don't allow for our own natural growth, our own expression. And that's really important because I see that deteriorating massively. People do not think for themselves. They don't. And they don't give things very freely as much anymore. Everything has become monetized, basically. Commodified and monetized. I'm interjecting here because it's a lot more than it was even just 10 years ago. I really think of AI, that's only just started, really. But that for sure will end up getting completely monetized and commodified. AI in itself maybe has some very good uses. Could have, definitely. But like anything, it's a double-edged sword. It depends who's wielding the data in this case. And when you look at who's wielding the data, my hopes are not very high for it. So in itself, it could be very useful, it could be very beneficial. But once the genie's out of the bottle, it's not looking great, is it? I actually got asked about this. Somebody from the university who is in the department, I think it's of informatics, and they're doing some project with the government, with the Scottish government, and they somehow got in touch with me, I don't know how. Maybe because I'm the Buddhist chaplain at the university, I don't know. But anyway, asked about what is the Buddhist, how do we see AI influencing Buddhism? I'd thought about AI, but I hadn't really kind of thought about it systematically. But I did end up thinking about it because I needed to reply to this person. I'll read you out just a quick paragraph. Because I think it's very relevant. That's why I'm interjecting it. So I think I said artificial intelligence is like any other scientific development. It can be used for the good, a common good, or as a commodity to be exploited for profit and power. It depends on the motivation of those wielding it. In either case, once the genie is out of the bottle, it will be very difficult to control. And we look at social media. A misnomer, if ever there was one, I don't see it as being very social, I see it being very antisocial. I'm not saying it doesn't have its social uses, it does, but most of what you hear about it is its toxicity, isn't it? You hear so much. Of course, the good things about it you don't hear so much because they're okay. But you do hear something about the bad effects, including people killing themselves because of things that have been said or done on social media. So how is that even called social media anymore? You know. So anyway, I just said that by concentrating time and talent and energy on developing AI, we risk, which will commodify and commercialize knowledge, we risk creating ever more dependency on technology, and I think it leads to atrophy of our natural intelligence. Hence, the growing societal and mental imbalances much in evidence today. I think the more we use it, and don't use our natural intelligence, the more our brains sort of atrophy. Because we don't use them. Like anything, use it or lose it, we say, don't we? There's a lot of emphasis put on training your body right now. I see loads of people running, which is a good thing, loads of people going to the gym, but it's become a bit mechanical, it's become a bit sort of obsessive, I would say. You know, Edinburgh's I've seen people running all the time, which is great, but sometimes it's just like, whoa, what's going on here, you know? And I live near a place that's a gym. I see a lot of people becoming gym bunnies, you know, so it's become obsessive. I think it's out of proportion. But I don't see them thinking about what they're doing beyond, it's good to be, you know, healthy and that. Anyway, I just think we have to be very, very careful. Anyway, so in answer to the question of, the perspective of this Buddhist, I said, is to reduce, it could be used to reduce excess profit for the few, so the multi-billionaires, while answering the needs of the many, in which case then that would be a good thing. And technology can be very helpful with that in the right hands and with altruistic motivation. But it should be our servant, not the master. And when you look at who is wielding it, I don't have a lot of confidence in that right now. So in answer to the question about how do I see Buddhism being influenced by AI, I flipped it right round. I just said I don't see a future for AI to impact Buddhism, but I aspire to a future in which Buddhism might impact AI. That would be something worth doing, so pursuing. And to that end, it's most important that we cultivate our natural intelligence to develop our inner wisdom. I'm talking about mind training here, basically. Develop our inner wisdom coupled with skillful means, which could be AI. And that's the way I would like to see it go. I said a bit more than that, but basically, I think it's the same thing that Rinpoche is talking about, except we didn't really have AI when he was alive. But if anything, it's even more urgent, more needed. So he's saying, we don't allow for our own natural growth, our own expression. I think this has overwhelmed our lives. And many of the things we learn don't have much use. What I mean is that if we want our lives to be useful, we have to understand what human value is. Why are we born as human? What is a human meant to achieve? What is a human capable of? And who am I? What are my capabilities? I think we have to ask these questions of ourselves rather than asking anyone else. The more we depend on AI or any other kind of technology, the more we depend on it and not ask those questions of ourselves, we're disempowering ourselves. And I'm really not saying we shouldn't use technology, I'm not saying that. But it should be a tool. It's to help us, not to substitute us. Can you see the difference there? I mean, it's so important. People do not ask questions. People always ask questions of others. They don't think for themselves or analyze. They don't ask questions of themselves. This is Rinpoche saying this. Sometimes people come to him, and ask, can you please tell me why I was born as a human being? How would I know if you do not know yourself? I do know that humans are capable of changing their future lives, but that needs mind training. Mind training is not something outside of you. If you have constant thoughts arising and you keep following them, then thoughts are taking over your life. Any old thoughts come into your mind. There's things sparking thoughts all over the place, a lot of which is negative, some of which is not, but it's just random stuff. So instead, he says, train your thoughts and conduct an internal dialogue. I need to slow down my mind. What do you think? You want to know what your motives are for mind training. You say to your thoughts, I'm not willing to listen to you all the time, all this random stuff going. I'm not willing to listen to you all the time. I'm not willing to always do what you want. If I do, then I want to know whether that is going to be the right thing or not. That's a way of giving yourself time to think. By giving yourself time, you will be able to choose the things which are less harmful to you and less harmful to others. We're always rushing about, aren't we? One thing and the next thing, you're not thinking what you're doing. Never mind what anybody else says, we have to think for ourselves, we really do. And even if it's you doing the right thing that somebody tells you and you're doing it, but if you've not really worked it out for yourself, then you've not taken it on board. You could be swayed either way. We really have to learn to think for ourselves. I don't see that being taught. I actually feel it's being discouraged. Because when you think for yourself, you have more power over what you do. And people like the ones who are in power don't want that. You know, it's much easier if you can be manipulated, sold more stuff. I do see people, the way it's begun, maybe I'm being a bit Brave New World or something, but I do see that people are becoming more robotic. It's like We're training the robots to become like humans, but the humans are becoming more like robots. It's not funny actually, is it? It's actually really serious. You know, you're like this on the phone, walking down the street, everybody's like this, the majority of people are like this. Boom! You know, walking across the road, on the buses, not talking to each other, not talking to the child, just like this. Really? I find that frightening. I use a phone. I'm not saying we should get rid of them. But check what's going on. Check what you're doing. Check what you see. Do you accept it all it's going a good way, this? I don't think so. So, I'm not willing to listen all the time. I'm not willing to always do what you want. Talking to your own mind now. Or somebody else. I know that I want to know whether that is going to be the right thing, whatever I do. That's a way of giving yourself time. Choosing the things to do which are less harmful to you, less harmful to others, hopefully beneficial for you, hopefully beneficial for others. That's what being a Buddhist is, isn't it? But whether you carry the name Buddhist or not isn't important. If you want to know what a Buddhist is, it means someone who thinks with compassion. Someone who presents compassion. Someone who wishes to help out of compassion. Such a person is a Buddhist, whether he or she describes themselves as a Buddhist or not. Doesn't matter. If you do not have compassion, or if you have some compassion but are unwilling to use it, then you're not a Buddhist. You might have taken refuge, you might have been to a lot of Buddhist teachings, but if you're not using any compassion, he's saying you're not a Buddhist. And I agree. You know, when I hear about people in Buddhist countries that are Buddhist countries, you know, but they're being cruel. You know, the army, the monks acting like they're in the army, or you're killing people. There are countries where that happens, isn't it? But they're all dressed up as monks and they seem to be Buddhist. But how is that Buddhist? That's a very obvious somebody not behaving as a Buddhist. If they're not even attempting to follow the teachings of the Buddha, how is that a Buddhist? So by training your mind, you try to change by analyzing yourself. You ask yourself, what kind of person are you? You look harder to see your own face more clearly. When you understand your identity, then you collect all the positive things. So you nurture all the positive things and learn how to grow by training your mind. You also learn how to stop all the negative and harmful things. And you need patience. You don't do it overnight. It becomes more subtle and more subtle, but it's, there's still negative stuff. Looking at the positives and negatives is a very good way to analyze yourself. He says, people always think, I'm a good person. Well, basically, I'm a good person. I think good things. There's a simple exercise you can do to find out if that's true. And so then he gives the exercise. In the teaching, it says that from the moment you get up in the morning till you go to bed at night, you look at the thoughts that are arising. You're still going about your life, you're still doing stuff, but you become more conscious of what you're thinking. You're not thinking more things or less things, you're just more conscious of what you're thinking. Honestly. And not sort of making it all nice now. I'm a good person, I must be doing all right, I'm a good person. Look at the things that are arising. For a negative thought, you have a pebble of a particular color. This is the exercise. For a positive thought, you have a different colored pebble. You can have a few pebbles. Get yourself some pebbles, some dark ones, some light ones, or beads. It could be red beads or blue beads. You 2 small things of different colors. So for a positive, we'll use the one pebble, but it could be anything. For a positive thought, you have a different colored pebble. They don't have to be black and white, as long as they're different colors. Whenever thoughts arise, you pick the pebble of an appropriate color. So whatever good actions you do, you take that colored pebble. Likewise for a bad action. Of course, you have to discern which is which. And then before you go to bed, you calculate which colour you've got more of. You'll have both for sure. When there are more good pebbles than bad ones, then you can appreciate and grateful for the thoughts and actions on that day and wish to do even better the next day. So that's a kind of promise to yourself. But if you aspire to, okay, don't be too self-satisfied, that's good, but you could do better. There's still some dark ones. If there are more bad pebbles or dark ones, or whichever one color it is, then you expected, then you don't punish yourself. Oh, I'm doing all the bad. No, you just say, well, at least I recognized it. Okay, I recognized it, and I'm going to do better the next day. So you don't need to beat yourself up. You do need to be honest, but you don't punish yourself. Why would you want to punish yourself for being honest? Being honest is a good thing, isn't it? If anything, you should punish yourself for not being honest and pretending everything's nice when it's not. So if you've noticed, if you've got more bad pebbles or dark pebbles because you've had negative thoughts, then okay, well, at least I recognized it. I'm going to try better tomorrow. And that, he says, this is a very simple way of training your mind. Because if you do that, you don't need to ask some teacher how good you're being or how bad. You are your own teacher. You are your best teacher. If you're aware, if you're self-aware. Your teacher won't know what's going in your mind as well as you know. Of course, you may cheat sometimes. But that's not very wise. But sometimes people do cheat. We're very good at cheating ourselves because we want to be good people. Oh, I'll just put a few more on that pile, But how are you going to learn anything if you do that? You're not going to train. This is the training. So if you pretend that the training will not be accurate if you do that then, so you won't get anywhere. We're good at cheating ourselves, so we want to be good people, but you don't want people telling you how bad you are or recognize yourself how bad you are. We always try to hide it. So obviously, that's not going to work with that attitude. Sometimes practitioners have 2 bags. Oh, anyway, that gets too complicated. I think you just have a bag of light-colored pebbles and a bag of dark-colored pebbles, and just have that. If you have the intention to improve yourself and improve your life, it's a very good guide. It protects you from so many negative actions, and it helps give strength to your mind training, actually doing something simple like that. But you're actually seeing it, the evidence in front of your eyes. It's a simple thing in a way, but it can help with something which is, it's making it a bit more concrete and noticeable, because a thought's a thought and then it's gone. And then you don't know. If you were looking throughout the day, you wouldn't have a way of thinking, well, was I predominantly negative? Was I predominantly more positive? But when you've got the evidence right before your eyes, it's right there in front of you, isn't it? I've never tried that. Maybe we should all try that, yeah? Might be hard to get loads of pebbles here, but we could get white, something, I don't know, beads or something. It lets you count your actions, your speech, and your thoughts. So all of those things, everything starts with a thought, then it might become your speech, or it might even become an action. You need to analyze yourself in more detail. General thoughts are often neither particularly good or bad. So it is the thoughts that can make a change to yourself or others that you need to consider. You don't have to consider every single thought. Oops, I missed a thought. What time's the train? Oh, I missed it. Those kind of thoughts you don't need to worry about. It's just whether they are positive or negative. Otherwise you would have a mountain of pebbles. You would never be able to move the pebbles. But so obviously, you have to apply it to is it something beneficial, is it something harmful? I hope you may find this a useful exercise. The whole idea is to find a way to be honest with yourself, not to kid yourself. We kid ourselves a lot. Be honest with yourselves, because that's the way you're going to learn. So when you're kidding yourself, you're sort of making it difficult. You put another obstacle in the way by not looking at it as it is. So this is a way to understand yourself, to ask, well, what kind of person am I? Once you've analysed yourself, you don't just leave it there. The point is to improve your life, and you will be much better at the end. So you have your own interests as well at heart, and those of others. Things can only get better. So it's a very positive thing to be doing. But in order to have a positive effect, you have to be honest with yourself. And then he says, in talking about mind training here, I'm perhaps not talking about enlightenment just now, but in the future maybe. Just keep on improving yourself by your own efforts, training every day. It is more than just wishing for good thoughts today and praying for 2 or 3 minutes and then doing a bit of meditation and do a bit of study. But then no sooner have you prayed than you're committing more bad actions because you've not actually seen where it's coming from. When we're studying the treatises and the texts and everything, if we just leave it at that level, we're not really applying it. We're just studying it. If we go to university, you can study Buddhism, you can go to the School of Divinity and study Buddhist art or Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist. But if you're not living it, you're not a Buddhist, you're studying about Buddhism. And you might have a degree in it. And you'll learn a lot about something. But that's not being a Buddhist. You're not even trying to be Buddhist, it's like studying history or geography, anything else, We're talking about mind training here, mind training ourselves, not about getting a degree in Buddhism. So just keep on proving yourself. You are your own work. You are the work. You are what needs working on. We just keep on proving ourselves by our own efforts, training every day. And it's more than just wishing for good thoughts today and praying for 2 or 3 minutes, and then no sooner have you prayed than you're committing some more bad actions because you've lost your awareness. You've already forgotten the prayers you said that morning. Well, then that's not useful. It's not fully training your mind. That's not bringing you benefit. Whatever training you do, it should have some proper benefit. It should have an end result. It's not, it's you are what it's about, not the qualification you get. I'm not saying you shouldn't have qualifications, by the way, but that's not what, this is way more important. This is to train yourself is more important than any qualification. Well, because it will affect your whole life, and not only this life, but the lives to come. The way you live, the way you die, the next lives. There's nothing more effective, more important. How to train your mind? You have to really have an honest appraisal in your daily life, reflecting on your actions, your thoughts, your actions, and the likely consequences. Mind training is not something outside of you. So, I think that's basically what he's saying. And I'm going to just say the final paragraph now, and then let's just sit with it and have a little meditation on it, just to sit with it. So he kind of sums it up with this. So we're not talking about different traditions and different manners and different. Some people do this, some people do that. What we're talking about is how to develop the positive in a way that everybody would recognize. No matter what country you're in, it's not dependent on tradition or culture and this. A human way of being that anybody would recognize wherever you are. Good action means action through which nobody suffers. Furthermore, that action itself brings goodness, something good, something beneficial from beginning to end. This is what you try to develop. If it's seen as something that is seen as good in one country but not in another, then that's to do more with cultural tradition and is not necessarily good or bad. We need to look at those things which are clearly positive wherever we are. So, kindness, compassion, caring, tolerance, patience, understanding, giving rise to actions that are positive, beneficial. All these are seen by beings everywhere to be positive. It doesn't matter where you are. Okay, so let's just sit with that. So just straighten up your posture and relax. Mind and body relaxed. And observing your mind. In the light of the understanding of Akong Rinpoche and the words of wisdom that he's given us. Well, I hope that's cast some light on the actual real meaning of mind training, you know. Something we do in our daily life, not just something we study separately. It's about us, it's about our life, who we are and what we're doing. That's what it is. You don't have to go anywhere to do it, you don't have to be anywhere, you're just wherever you are. Okay, so we'll finish by dedicating the merit of our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. O sanam de tam che sik pani tokne ne pe danam pam che ne jegana chi bala dupai se pe sole doa doa show. So thank you for coming and for listening. Apologies if anything I've said that was from me and not from Rinpoche has not been quite right. I do ask him to watch me about that, but I think I made it quite clear which was my interjections. But I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. But I apologize for anything that wasn't up to standard. I'll give myself a black pebble for that one, and a white pebble for the good one. But I'm also aware of how things have changed in the years since Rinpoche died, you know, and I think there's even more reason to be aware of ourselves and what we're doing and how it impacts, and the dangers of it, and also the benefits of it. So, okay.